Maybe you think God has moved away. Maybe you're silently looking up at the sky, asking, Lord, why doesn't anything change? You pray, you hope, you believe, but the days go on the same. The doors remain closed, and everything seems suspended, as if time has stopped, as if God has turned away. But He hasn't. He hasn't left you. He hasn't forgotten you. He is there. Silent, yes, but present. Much more present than you imagine. Sometimes the sky screams. In the silence, you are not unanswered. You are being protected. You are being guarded. You are being spared. What you call abandonment can be cared for. What you call delay can be deliverance. What you call silence can be an invisible barrier between you and an abyss you didn't even know existed. Maybe you're blaming yourself for not being strong enough, for not succeeding once again, for missing yet another opportunity. But what if God had, with His own hands, closed that door? What if He had said no because He loves you too much to let you fall where you thought you should? There are people who have walked away and it hurt, but take a deep breath. Look again. Was that presence really good? Wasn't that bond draining your peace, your light, your essence? God saw what you didn't see. God heard conversations you never heard. God perceived intentions your eyes couldn't see. He cut them off before the poison could spread. And even though you miss them, even though it seems unfair, heaven doesn't act to please you. Heaven acts to protect you. And when everything seems still, when the days are the same and the answers don't come, is there a peace you can't explain? A relief without reason? A rest in your soul that you don't know where it comes from? This isn't divine indifference. This is hidden presence. It's silent care. It's God saying, not now, because I know you, and I know you're not ready yet, and I know the path isn't clear yet, and I know that if I let you go, you wouldn't come back the same. You're not paralyzed. You're being preserved. Heaven is organizing behind the scenes that your eyes can't see, canceling traps, deflecting accidents, preventing wrong alliances. And if you stop to think, how many times have you complained about something that didn't work out, only to realize later that it was deliverance? How many times have you grumbled and then wept with gratitude that God didn't allow it? Heaven hasn't forgotten you. Heaven is working on your behalf. Today, I want to show you the evidence, not of God's noisy presence, but of His silent protection. I want to guide you through signs you may have ignored, down paths you thought were a detour, but were actually salvation. Because there are times when God doesn't answer, He protects, and He protects firmly, with love, with wisdom, even if you don't understand, even if it hurts, because the Father who loves also hides, also remains silent, also says no. And you who have been feeling forgotten, perhaps you are just hidden, guarded, shielded. Perhaps heaven is silent because it has already responded with protection. And today, in this video, you will recognize each of these hidden responses. You will remember locked doors that were deliverances, people who left before they destroyed their faith, invitations that seemed like gold but were actually traps in disguise. And you will understand once and for all that God never stopped acting. He just stopped explaining. Let's begin. Because maybe you don't need a new answer. Maybe you just need to recognize the signs of the care that's already happening, even in God's silence. When nothing changes, but evil doesn't advance either. There are times when life seems frozen. Nothing advances, nothing retreats, everything remains the same. You pray, fast, cry out, and the scene remains unchanged. It feels like stagnation. It feels like abandonment. But look closer. Evil hasn't advanced either. Darkness tried, but it didn't pass. Chaos tried to settle in, but it was contained. And this, however invisible, is a sign of protection. It's God building walls where you only see routine. It's heaven holding evil at bay while preparing your heart for the next season. You might think that the lack of movement is a sign of God's absence, but God doesn't just prove himself with visible miracles. He also reveals himself in deliverances you never knew you needed. There are pains that never came. There are losses that were avoided without you even realizing it. And there is a peace that doesn't fit the moment you're living in, a peace that makes no sense, that doesn't come from the world, that isn't born of circumstances. This silent peace is a spiritual response. It's a shield. It's heaven saying, even if you don't see it, I am here. Some doors didn't open. Some changes didn't happen. But what if what you call stagnation is actually preservation? What if that job you were denied, that relationship that didn't come back, that project that didn't move forward, were God's silent way of telling you, I waited for you to understand that not everything that seems like a blessing comes from me. Perhaps you called punishment what was a detour of tragedy. Perhaps what seemed like abandonment was just the care of a father who preferred to protect you in silence rather than explain it to you in words. Think of Moses. He prayed before the sea, but the sea didn't part while he spoke to God. The sea parted when he took the first step, when he moved forward even though there was no path. Sometimes heaven is waiting for your movement of faith to reveal the miracle. Other times the miracle is already happening, only within you. You just haven't realized it yet. So, when everything seems the same, stop and observe. If evil hasn't advanced, if the weight hasn't increased, if the anguish hasn't won, then heaven is at work. And even if God isn't making noise, he continues to set limits on what the enemy can touch. You are protected, even in silence, even without signs. Heaven is working. And perhaps the greatest miracle is already happening right now. You are still standing, still breathing, still believing. And that, in itself, is a testimony. Relationships that were cut off without explanation. Some people leave your life so abruptly, so without warning, that it feels unfair. It feels like abandonment. It feels like betrayal. But not every absence is a loss. Sometimes it's relief in disguise. Sometimes heaven answers what you didn't have the courage to ask for, and cuts for you what you still insisted on carrying, because you were clinging to what was making you sick, because you still called friendship what was already dependence, because even exhausted you didn't want to let go. Then heaven lets go. There were bonds that seemed promising. People who arrived with beautiful words, kind gestures, and the appearance of a blessing. But behind the affection, there was poison, disguised, silent, a kind of presence that slowly stole your peace, that distanced you from your essence, that sucked your light, and you, with a heart full of faith, tried to justify, tried to save, tried to reconnect what God had already separated, because you mistook need for love, because you feared being alone, because you thought forgiveness was repeating the same cycle. But the truth is, heaven never asked you to carry the one who was dragging you down. Heaven never demanded that you stay trapped where your soul already screamed for freedom. Heaven only hoped you would understand. Not all separation is punishment. Some are deliverance. And when that connection ended, when that friendship cooled, when that person disappeared, God had already seen the future. He had already perceived what you couldn't. He had already decided to protect your heart, even if it meant hurting it at first. The absence that hurts today could be the presence that would destroy you tomorrow. And when distance brings relief, even if mixed with longing, it's a sign that your soul has breathed, that something has been broken, but something has also been restored within you. Don't ignore this relief. It's a sign. It's an answer. It's discernment from heaven. The sky cuts before the poison spreads, and if you feel guilty about it, breathe. You didn't sin by walking away from those who hurt you. You obeyed, you matured, and God saw it. God saw you trying, insisting, praying, forgiving, even when it was difficult. And now, He gives you rest, even if silently, even if it seems strange, because divine protection sometimes comes as an unexpected goodbye. And you, even wounded, were spared. And that is grace. It is deliverance. It is love. The refused invitation, the job that didn't come, the closed door. It's hard to accept that something that seemed right didn't materialize, that long-awaited opening, that invitation that seemed like an answer, that chance you swore would be the turning point of your life. When everything goes wrong, the soul asks, where did I go wrong? But what if the mistake wasn't yours? What if heaven said no, not because you weren't capable, but because you were too precious to enter a place that would later reveal destruction? Often, you mourn what you lost without understanding what was actually avoided. You call failure what was actually protection. What seemed like a path was a trap. What seemed like honor was deception. But heaven saw what was behind it, and locked the door, and silenced the answer, and left you empty-handed, so you wouldn't fill your heart with what would distance you from your purpose. There were stories like this. People cried over a job they were denied, over a door that wouldn't open. Years later, they discovered that the company went bankrupt, that the project reeked of corruption, that the environment was toxic. God knew. God saw it first. God cancelled what seemed like a blessing, but was actually a brilliant distraction. Because not every good opportunity comes from Him. Some are just disguised shortcuts which divert the call and sink the soul. You may have blamed yourself for not having insisted more, for not having forced another door, for not having accepted that invitation. But there are times when heaven stops us from following, not out of weakness, but out of mercy. Like Jonah, who fled the call and ended up in the belly of a fish. Isolated, silent, but protected. Because even in his error, heaven chose to deliver him from the storm he himself had provoked. There are deliverances that hold us captive so that we do not destroy ourselves in our own haste. If you want to understand God's care, do a memory exercise. Recall every great loss that sometime later turned out to be a great deliverance. You are not being punished, you are being preserved, and even if you don't understand it now, even if it hurts deeply, heaven remains sovereign, and when He closes a door, it's because the other side has no peace. And God will never push you where He wouldn't enter with you. If He closed it, it was protection, and that is already an answer, even without words, even in silence. Protection disguised as waiting. There are times when the soul cries out for urgency, but heaven responds with pause. You feel ready, you feel the time has come, you feel you've endured too much, but nothing happens. The doors don't open, the answers don't come. Life continues with a painful slowness, and within this silence, a restlessness arises. Does God still see me? But what you call delay may be God saying, wait, not yet. Waiting isn't always absence. Often it's protection, a loving restraint from a Father who knows the right time, because God is in no hurry. And more than that, He knows the dangers that rushing hides. We believe that God acts when He moves, when He opens, when He releases, but He also acts when He holds, when He impedes, when He silences. God's voice is also the time He chooses. And if He's holding you now, it's because He loves you too much to let you go unprepared. But this waiting cannot be confused with paralysis. The Spirit of God never complaces us. He confronts us. He gives us peace, yes, but it's a peace that moves, that challenges, that cleanses the interior, that prepares the soul. The comfort zone is something else. It's the place where fear masquerades as prudence, where faith becomes an excuse, where hope is silenced, And that's why sometimes we need to stop and ask ourselves sincerely, am I waiting because I trust or because I'm afraid to act? There are times when heaven protects us even from ourselves, because if left to our own anxiety, we would have already entered into wars that weren't ours, alliances that would crush us, paths that would destroy us from within. When God is silent, it's often because he knows us better than we know ourselves, because he knows that if he speaks, we'll run, so he is silent. He waits. He hides the next step to heal us before we even begin. Maybe you're experiencing this right now, a time where everything seems stuck. But it's not punishment, it's care, it's preparation. It's God uprooting old fears, deep-rooted insecurities, and haste disguised as faith. And when he realizes your soul no longer needs haste as a crutch, then he will release you, he will open you, he will show you. But until that happens, know this: God's silence is an invisible embrace, and deep down you feel it. You feel something is being addressed, that something is being protected, that you don't yet know what nigh, but you know you're not alone. And that feeling, that intuition that insists on saying it's not time yet, is heaven protecting you, guarding you, and saying, trust. I'm still in control, even in the silence, even without rushing, even if you don't yet understand, because God's love isn't measured by speed, but by the faithfulness of a care that never fails, the isolation that heals. There's a kind of loneliness that feels like punishment, a silence all around that echoes like rejection. You try to understand, but find no reason. People move away, voices fade, invitations cease, and suddenly, you're alone. At first, it hurts. It feels like something has been ripped away. It feels like God has left you by the side of the road. But over time, if you listen carefully, you'll realize this isolation smells like sanctuary. It's as if heaven has closed the curtains to heal what no one else can touch. When everything goes silent on the outside, it's because something needs healing on the inside. Heaven gathers you not to punish you, but to cleanse you, to remove what you've allowed to accumulate. Hurts, frustrated expectations, old guilt, hidden weariness. God didn't remove you from the noise by accident. He removed you from the tumult because the outside sound was drowning out the cry of your soul. And in this space void of noise, you begin to hear again. Not with your ears, but with your spirit. Desperation for quick answers often hinders this process. The rush to get back into action, to reconnect, to have again what no longer makes sense. But this time away has a purpose. Not to exclude you, but to reorient you. Because there are healings that only happen in the desert. There are revelations that only emerge in the cave. And there are voices of God that are only heard when everything else falls silent. Elijah knew this. He fled to a cave thinking it was the end. But there, he heard God's whisper. It didn't come in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire. It came in silence. It came gently. It came with precision. This is the kind of protection that's hard to understand at first, because it feels like abandonment. But it's care. Heaven removed you from the scene because it saw you were too exhausted to continue giving, because it noticed you were getting lost in the words of others, forgetting your own voice. So it took you in. And in this withdrawal, the cleansing begins, the cleansing, the rebuilding. If you're there in this place of silence, breathe. It's not the end, it's a new beginning. It's the sacred pause before the next season. It's heaven healing what you didn't even know was broken. And when all is ready, when your spirit is cleansed, when your vision is clear, God will open the curtain again. But until then, accept this solitude as sacred, because it is. It's God setting you apart to restore. And what He restored comes back different, comes back strong, comes back ready, comes back full of peace, comes back healed. when danger doesn't reach you and you didn't even notice. There are deliverances that shine like miracles, and there are others that go unnoticed, silent, hidden behind delays, denials, or distances. And it is precisely in these that heaven works most, because the deliverances you see make you grateful, but the ones you never see, those keep you alive. They keep you whole. They protect you even before pain tries to approach. It's easy to recognize God's care when He takes something out of your path. But what about when He takes you out of the way of something? What about when that canceled meeting saved you from an accident? What about when that canceled appointment prevented you from crossing paths with someone who would have dragged you down emotionally? What about when that friendship fizzled out just before it could have dragged you into a pit of no return? You call it coincidence, but heaven calls it preemptive protection. Not every attack reaches you, because there are angels on the path. There are ancient prayers that still stand. There are intercessions that surround you like walls. You didn't see it, but you were protected. You didn't know it, but you were spared. You didn't feel it, but you were delivered. And this, however invisible it may be, is living proof that heaven continues to watch over your life. And perhaps, in your haste, you even complained. You thought you were wasting time, that things were delayed, that life was at a standstill. But in truth, it was precisely this delay that prevented a tragedy. It was this detour that kept you from a trap. It was this no that shielded you from a fall. There are wars you never had to fight because God already won before you even knew they existed. And that's why gratitude can't be limited to what meets the eye. It needs to reach behind the scenes. It needs to recognize the invisible hand that held back the tragedy, the hand that averted evil, the hand that closed the door, the hand that sheltered you in the darkness. God doesn't act only when you ask. He acts all the time, even while you sleep, even when you complain, even when you don't even realize you needed protection. Today, perhaps you're there, trying to understand the whys, trying to find meaning in the delays, the pauses, the absences. But what if, for a moment, you looked at everything that didn't happen? At the accidents avoided, at the crises that didn't arrive, at the pains that were stopped before they could even arise. Perhaps then, in that moment of awareness, you'll recognize, I was protected. And that phrase, even spoken silently, is already a prayer. It's already a praise. It's already a gratitude. Because heaven acts, even when you don't see it, even when you don't understand, even when you don't even know you're being protected. The inner disarray that prevents you from entering where you shouldn't. Not all restlessness comes from fear. Not all anxiety is a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's the spirit alerting the soul. It's the sky turning on red lights inside, while everything seems green outside. You look at that opportunity and think everything is falling into place. But at the same time, you feel a weight on your chest, a silent anguish, a disarray you can't name. It's as if something inside you is screaming, but you try to silence it with prayers that deep down already know the answer. This restlessness isn't the enemy's opposition, it's divine discernment, because God also speaks through what doesn't make sense to feel. The soul feels before the body understands. And often, God protects you by making your own peace withdraw from a situation that seemed perfect. The invitation was good, the setting was beautiful, the proposal seemed fair, but deep down, something didn't fit. Something prevented you from moving forward with ease. And you tried to spiritualize, tried to persist in the name of faith, tried to transform into a mission what heaven never authorized. Paul lived this. A man filled with the Spirit, ready to preach, eager to fulfill his calling. But when he tried to go to Asia, the Holy Spirit stopped him. There was no sin, there was no error, there was redirection. Not everything that is a mission is for now. Not everything that is good is God's will, and sometimes heaven protects by closing even sacred doors, because it knows that if you enter that station out of time, you will get lost along the way. This is one of the hardest protections to accept, because everything seems right, except you, because no one around you understands why you resist. But deep down, you know, your soul is rebelling, your peace is hidden, your essence is constricted. And this, as confusing as it may seem, is heaven saying, this path is not for you. You're not in crisis, you're discerning, and the discomfort you feel is a sign that the Spirit still guides you, still confronts you, still guards you, because God won't allow you to enter where His presence won't go with you. And as much as it hurts to stop, as much as it seems wasteful to retreat, as much as it feels lonely to say no when everything and everyone says yes, this is spiritual maturity, this is obedience, this is protection. Sometimes heaven protects you by making your soul rebel against that which would separate you from God. And in that silent cry of the soul, there is direction, there is an answer, there is care, even if you don't understand it yet, even if it seems strange, even if it hurts too much to accept, because heaven will never let you enter a place where you would lose who you truly are. And that is already a form of salvation. Heaven is protecting you, even in God's silence. Perhaps you've come this far expecting a different answer, a clear sign, a loud miracle, an immediate change. But God doesn't always act loudly. Sometimes He acts absently, and yet He's there, present, watchful, taking care of every detail you haven't yet seen. Because God's silence isn't a void, it's a sacred space where He builds, protects, and prepares without fanfare. You may have felt ignored, you may have felt forgotten, you may even have believed you'd made such a mistake that you'd lost God's favor. But the truth is, heaven has ways of loving that you don't always recognize at the time. It loves when it opens paths, but it also loves when it closes them. It loves when it brings people together, but it also loves when it drives them apart. It loves when it fulfills your desires, but it loves even more when it prevents you from doing something that would distance you from Him. This silence you feel is not punishment, it's a shield. It's the language of deep care. It's heaven surrounding you with invisible barriers so that what belongs to God remains, and what doesn't leaves before it hurts you again. And if you look with the eyes of the Spirit, you'll realize many of the things you lost were precisely the things that were preventing your heart from breathing. You are not stagnant, you are guarded. You are not rejected, you are preserved. God has not cast you aside. He placed you under a cloud, as He did with the people in the desert. During the day, shade. During the night, fire. Always present, always close by, always guiding. Even when the people could not see the direction was still there. God's silence isn't an absence of response, it's a form of response. It's when He decides it's better to protect you than to explain. It's better to guard your heart than to please your ego. It's better to hide you for a time and then reveal you in peace, whole, healed. Because heaven isn't in a hurry, but it also doesn't make mistakes. He waits for the right time, and in that time, He takes care of you. And now, if you look back honestly, you'll realize you were spared, you were diverted, you were hidden. And even though all of this came without explanation, without warning, without noise, heaven was there, working in silence, delivering in silence, loving in silence. And this love, though silent, has sustained you thus far. So the next time the silence feels heavy, remember you may not be hearing God, but He still sees you, still protects you, still loves you. And that's all you need. Because even without words, heaven still speaks. And when it speaks, it's always to care, always to protect, always to save. Now that you've heard every bit of evidence, perhaps your heart is beginning to understand that heaven never stopped working. It never left you helpless. It never kept silent for lack of love. Quite the opposite. It kept silent because it loves too much. It kept silent because it knows how much your soul needed protection before any explanation, because there are answers that heal, but there are silences that save. You've experienced closed doors, painful losses, unjustified separations, and seemingly eternal waiting times. But in the midst of it all, God was there, watching over your story from behind the scenes, protecting you from rash choices, destructive relationships, and spiritual traps. And even when you didn't understand, even when you cried for direction, heaven was already responding with deliverance. You are not forgotten. You are being kept. You are being prepared. You are being strengthened, because there are promises that are only fulfilled after silence. There are healings that only happen when everything around you falls silent. And there are callings that only blossom after the soul learns to trust, even without understanding. And you, who have endured so much, who have resisted so much, who have continued to believe even in silence, are closer than you imagine. Don't blame yourself for protecting yourself. Don't regret saying no. Don't be ashamed for walking away from what was hurting you. God saw. God approved. God sustained. And now He confirms you didn't make a mistake in protecting yourself. You obeyed. You matured. And that has value in heaven. Even if no one recognized it, even if no one applauded, heaven is protecting you. It still is. Even when everything seems the same. Even when nothing makes sense, even when you feel like giving up, because God's love doesn't depend on your certainties. He remains steadfast, even when you're weak. He continues to watch over you, even when you don't realize it. And He will continue to do so until you look back and say, with tears of relief, it was God. It was Him all along. May you leave this video with peace in your heart, with discernment in your eyes, and with the certainty that even if heaven is silent, He continues to act, He continues to care, He continues to love you with a love that protects, even from what you cannot see. Because this is the God you serve, a God who does not abandon, a God who loves even in silence, and saves, even when everything seems still. He is with you, always has been, and always will be.